Real Brokerage just bought Remax for $880 million. The press release hit before I had a chance at my Morning Joe. Mike Fawaz is back with a new broker platform, and UWM is the first lender on board. A brokerage owner is sitting in a federal courtroom in Milwaukee right now on a detention hearing for guns, drugs, and money laundering. Powell is officially out at the Fed. The board flipped overnight. Welcome to My Real Estate Show Unfiltered. I'm Sandy Lynn Burnett, CEO of a nationally expanding real estate brokerage that I built after seeing exactly where the industry fails agents with low standards, weak leadership, and a lack of accountability.
And I'm your co-host, Josh Reese. I am a lead generation consultant. I am the director of advancement, and I met Sandy Lynn because her business partner threatened to burn my house down.
That's how we do things around here, folks. We've also are joined by producer Brian. I actually served with him over 20 years ago in the Marine Corps. So with that, let's get started. All right, here is the big topic that everybody's talking about. And honestly, Josh, I called your ass at like 6 a.m. your time, and I wasn't even thinking about time. This was breaking news. Luckily it went straight to voicemail, but Real Brokerage announced this morning it is acquiring Remax Holdings in a deal valued at roughly $880 million. The combined company will be called Real Remax Group. Tamir Poleg leads, headquartered in Miami, trades on NASDAQ under the ticker REAX, R-E-A-X. 180,000 plus agents across 120 countries post-close. That's how many agents they'll have, okay? Real shareholders own 59% of the combined company. Morgan Stanley and Apollo backed a $550 million financing commitment. Remax shareholders elect 5.152 shares or $13.80 cash per share if they want to cash out. Pro forma 2025, $2.3 billion revenue, 157 million EBITDA, targeted 30 million annual run rate cost savings. Closes 2H 2026 pending regulatory and shareholder approval. What's 2H?
Well, I thought it would be like quarter two.
Yeah, but like that'd be like too cute. Like, so what? Producer Brian's going to look up what the hell 2H is for us 2H. Because I have no idea what that is. So this is the second monster brokerage roll up in 6 months. Compass swallowed Anywhere for $1.6 billion, which had Coldwell, Century 21, Sotheby's, Corcoran. And now Real is eating Remax. So the middle of the brokerage market is gone. Just like it's so crazy that we were talking about Ryan Serhant at Serhant period, you know, with his crazy, like, what are we, like the, not recommendations. What am I trying to say? Predictions. Yeah.
Oh, prediction.
His crazy predictions, of talking about these real estate brokerages are just going to start collapsing up under each other. But here's one super quiet detail that I found fascinating. Remax actually kept the Motto Mortgage franchise brand intact, which means Real now owns the only national mortgage brokerage franchise in the United States.
Yeah, which to me, that might have been what they really wanted. Because they've been trying to get in title and mortgage for a while now. And, you know, it might have just been one of those things where it was just easier to acquire that piece. You know, we've seen that with some, like, for example, when Rocket and Redfin and they merged, Rocket straight up said, we don't really care about Redfin. We don't care. We just want the infrastructure and we want their data. So we don't really care about that. We're willing to acquire them just to get this one piece. I could almost see that happening with this acquisition, maybe, where Real's like, we just want that one piece of the business and we're just going to take the whole thing over to get it.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Remax needed the scale that they frankly could not build. They were just a franchise company, but Real needed a brand that they could not buy. They just could not grow into a brand that people recognized. And that was like Remax's number one selling point. They would tell everybody, like, you're worth nothing until you have that red and white and blue balloon in front of your name, or whatever the fuck the color balloon is, you know. But they say that you need that balloon, you need that balloon. So give me some of your hot takes on this, Josh, because I cannot wait to hear your perspective.
So, I mean, first of all, I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more acquisition from, you know, larger companies buying a little bit smaller companies, because let's face it, it's cheaper to grow that way. And I think that's one thing with Real and the EXP model that we've seen is on their own, they've become stagnant because of the rev share model. It's hard for them to really gain any more market share without doing something like this. So, you know, I think what we've seen, especially with EXP, who, in my opinion, they're a few years ahead of Real. I think them and Real have a very similar business model, but EXP, we've seen stagnation finally. And they've stopped really kind of growing. They had a terrible shareholder report recently where they lost a ton of money last year, and it was because they're not growing. They've become stagnant, and I think Real is seeing that. And I will say the one thing that the Real leadership I think has done really well from go with their brokerage is they've looked at EXP and they've improved upon the issues that EXP had. My biggest thing with this is we have, and this kind of happened with the Compass a little bit in the Anywhere, but I think this one is more, you have a company that's a non-franchise model buying out a franchise business. And I'm super curious. I think this will be a great thing for the agents. I think the agents going from Remax to Real will be great. I think they're going to get a lot of new tech. I think they're going to get more support. But the problem that I have is what's going to happen to these franchise owners? Because like in our market, there's a Remax franchise that has been here like 30, 40 years. Are they just obsolete now? Because
I'm thinking and I don't know how it's going to be, but I'm thinking, like, I'm curious to see, will these franchise owners have a chance to renew their contracts? Or like, are they going to keep the franchise aspect at all? Are they going to keep, you know, the buildings and everything that goes along with that? I almost think it would be smart to, because there are agents that want an office and they'll die on that hill. And then there are agents who are more, you know, virtually leaning. So I'm very curious to see how many Remax franchisees go quiet over the next 30 days. By the way, I'm just using my brain. I think 2H is second half. That's what I think it is.
that makes sense.
Second half of the year. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with that. I'm good. I can buy in on that one. I think it's going to be interesting because I think there's still a lot of unknowns, but I really think the losers in this are going to be the franchise owners that have built these businesses over the last 30 years, and now they've literally overnight lost control.
Well, Gene Frederick used to own, like, I want to say the entire state of Texas in Remax franchises. This was way back when. This was the early days that he actually bought into Glenn Sanford's vision on EXP. But I think he owned Texas for Remax, which is insane. And once he saw Glenn's vision, he sold all of his franchises off. He's like, this is the way. He's now like, he makes like almost $1 million a month in rev share, right? Because he's one of the guys at the top, right? But that just has me thinking, what about these people? What in Iowa, it's Remax Concepts. Remax Concepts has been slowly buying up a whole bunch of, like, probably failing Remaxes. Why else wouldn't they sell, you know? And so I'm interested to see these guys that have put so much time, effort, and energy into a brand they don't control. Wonder what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the big issue too with this whole, you know, we kind of saw it with like EXP and Real going to the, you know, rev share stock type option model. And I think people have realized that's really not the best way to do it, because agents move around. They're really the brokerage's only valuable asset. They've freedom to move around and everything.
But Josh, they're all tech companies.
So let's talk about that. What tech do they have?
Tech that only their agents can use.
Right?
Tech that they can't sell to other brokerages, to their competition.
And that's the thing. Like, I had this conversation with an EXP agent, and they were touting, EXP World, and this was a while back, about EXP World, and it was this, and they were presented that like this was going to be this big money-making platform. And I looked at them, and I'm like, wait, so the only people that it would be relevant for is your competition. So they're going to take this proprietary software that's so good for EXP and generating so much wealth for them, and then you're just going to give it to your competition? That you're like, no, that does, there's no white labeling. Now, if it can be sold to outside industries, okay, great,
And I will say that EXP for a while, so I joined it like back in the day. I believe in 2020, they got a contract with the NBA for EXP World. And then there were all these little like jobs. You could go be like a little EXP World salesperson and get a commission and stuff. But again, I got my real estate license to sell fucking real estate. Like everybody keeps getting all like sidetracked and shit.
Yeah.
Even me. These are the lessons I've learned.
Yeah. Well, but I think that's part of it is real estate in itself, buying and selling houses is not sexy. It's not, and it's hard.
They make it look so sexy on, $1 million listing, selling sunset, everything. And that's, frankly, it fucking hurts because the consumers think that all we do is walk around looking pretty, open a couple of doors, and then go buy some more Louboutins for our fucking closets when we're done. And I'm like, oh my God, you have no idea. How demeaning and fucking dirty real estate actually is.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing too that EXP and Real both realized is your agent count matters a lot, especially when you're in the world of stocks and public offerings, and those are the things that give you value. And I think the interesting thing that they figured out is agents that sign up and just are selling houses don't stick around very long for the most part. Statistically speaking, the failure rate in real estate, 80% don't make their first renewal. But I think the genius of the EXP and Real model is, well, we can retain agents that aren't even producing because they're focusing on their rev share, which once again, according to one person that, we'll debate how accurate this is, but he said the average rev share check is like $251 a month.
Well, that was over at Epic though. And Epic was bragging that they pay 80% of their revenue out to their agents. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't say that out loud if I'm a company trying to go public. What the fuck?
Well, but didn't he say that was like the industry leader was $251 a month on average in rev share?
Yeah.
I thought that's what he said. And so, but that's what's crazy to me is all these brokerages that have a rev share model, because now there's a ton of them, there's a ton of them. And they're literally locking agents in who are not producing. They're paying MLS dues. Most of them are. You're paying licensing fees and all that type of stuff. And on average, the rev share is $251 a month.
Exactly. It's your golden handcuffs because it's not what you're actually getting paid. It's the dream of what you think you can actually make.
And all they have to do is float the guy in Texas who makes $1 million a month, and they sell the dream. And that's the part of the whole MLM real estate business model that I'm like, it doesn't check the boxes, but they have to do it when you're a public company, because let's face it, if they start dumping agents, that's their value. The stock price is going to tumble.
And that's just like what you were saying is if you're at a company, look at who that company promotes. Look who's on stage speaking. Like, is it the big producers that are motivating you, or do they have their top recruiters up there, like showing you what your life could be like if you recruit all these agents? And, I was just thinking about what you made a very important point about these agents that maybe they aren't producing, they're not closing any deals, they are trying and they're not closing any deals, but like, where's your credibility for recruiting all these other fucking agents? That's what's crazy too. But the point that you made was that they're still paying MLS fees. And I know of one MLS in particular in the state of Georgia that kicks back MLS fees directly back to the brokerage. And the brokerage makes like, EXP makes like hundreds of thousands a month. I mean, don't quote me on that number, but it's like a lot. It's a lot of fucking money. So imagine that too, where it's almost like even if we're not making money on your production, we're still having this handshake thing where NAR loves us because we keep all these agents with NAR. They're all having to pay dues. And then we get money even if they're producing or not.
Well, and I think what's crazy too is, you mentioned the whole conference thing and who they have come on the stage, but also like think about what they're teaching you, because most of the time at these conferences, it's 2 days of how to recruit people, about 30 minutes of how to sell homes more efficiently, and then a party the rest of the time.
Well, let's talk about money, Josh. How come the recruiters of the company are the only ones making money, rev share, whatever, only ones being paid cash, but the actual backbone of the company, the producers, are the ones getting rewarded with, frankly, fake stock because you don't know how much it's going to be worth 3 years from now. It could be, your entire cap still, and you could make more money, but it could be worth, and I remember the recruiter guy being like, even if it's worth $1, like I still, got some money back. Does your brokerage give you money back? And it's like, that's incredibly manipulative to me.
Oh yeah. Well, and to me, it's even crazier that once again, in this industry, agents are falling for that.
And they convince their agents to buy stock with their commissions on top of that. Give them more money.
Yeah, it just doesn't, to me. Now, if you can build up a good downline and you can make a secondary, great. I'm all for it. The problem I see with it is the numbers just don't add up long term. And my thought process is always, if you're at a brokerage that teaches you how to sell 3-4 more homes a year because you're better trained as an agent, then that's a much better option for you anyways. Like long term, you're going to make way more doing, more homes a year. But for some reason, we're all focused on, I need to build my, downlines. And I think it's funny too, because so I'm in a very small market and we have, I think, 2 or 3 real agents and we have more EXP agents. But it's really funny because talking to them, they were all sold the dream of building these huge downlines. And then you're like, well, how many have you recruited? And they're like, oh, none. And you're like, none? Why? And they're like, well, because by the time the recruiter came in and recruited all the people that he needed to recruit, there was nobody else for us to go get. And I'm like, so why are you still there? Oh, well, I could build
I'm going to build this downline. Yeah.
You've already found out that ain't going to happen.
And I'll tell you what, Josh, I was in fairly early to the EXP game. I had half of the state of Iowa in my downline. I had over 350 agents in my downline. My rev share check was between a couple hundred a month, maybe over 1,000 here and there. It was fucking pathetic. Why? Because I didn't have my tiers open, this tier and that tier, and you have to have this many agents and you're this tier and that tier, which causes me then to compete with the people that I would have recruited, right? And it was just, it's built on toxicity. It is built to be toxic. Not only are you recruiting in real estate, but now you're like fucking each other over in this whole recruiting game. Then let's talk about relationships. I call you about, and you're like, oh, is Sandy calling me to recruit me? Or is she actually calling me about my listing? I'm not going to answer my phone. She can text me. Then you see all these posts on Facebook. Why don't agents answer their phone anymore? That's unprofessional.
Yeah. And the other thing for me is like, just look historically when it comes to business, what rev share businesses have actually survived long term? Very, very few.
Let's look at what was that makeup company that was a huge rev share company? R&F, Rodan and Fields.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I like their stuff. I like their skincare stuff. But these people built up, some of these women men, maybe, I don't know, they built up huge downlines and they were, really banking on this income. And then one day, Rodan and Fields woke up and said, we are an affiliate company now, and completely changed the game, which they were smart to go that direction. Don't get me wrong, but we're an affiliate company now. Boom. One and done.
Yep. Well, and I forget what the name of it, the fitness supplement company. Advocare. They did the same thing. I know some people that had huge Advocare downlines. They were making, 70, 80 grand a month, and literally overnight it was gone because they were like, we went to an affiliate program and
EXP calls it sustainable revenue share. Well, if it's so sustainable, then why do you have to change your model of revenue share like every other year?
Yeah. Well, and not only change it, but it's got worse for the agents every year. They change it. Every time they change it, agents get more or less of the piece of the pie. The model to me is unsustainable. I think historically speaking, there's been very few businesses that can do a rev share model. I think you're a little different when you're like employee owned, you're a private company. That's a little different. But let's face it, these are publicly traded companies now. So, at some point, if I'm a shareholder and I find out that the company is giving away 80% of the revenue, I'm going to go, wait a second, hang on. I want my returns.
Exactly.
You take that away from your agents and give it to me as a shareholder.
Mm-hmm.
And let's also face it, agents own a smaller percentage of these brokerage than non-agents. A lot of these companies are owned majority by not people at the actual brokerage. So you don't have a voice. And so when the shareholders say, hey, we need to decrease the rev share so we can be more profitable on the stock side of things, you can't stop it. You can't raise your hand and say, I don't like that because I get rev share money. That's too bad, and that's part of the problem with the dilution of stocks is over time, you don't really have a voice anymore. I mean, EXP has whatever, 110 million shares, or I don't even know what it is, but it's a lot,
Mm-hmm. No, EXP is close to I think last I checked, it was 167 million.
Okay.
I think Real's well over 200 million.
Yeah.
We are, just for the record, 10 million shares.
And we're not public.
We are very undiluted,
Yeah. And we're not public. So the only people, we are the gatekeepers with who owns that equity in our company.
Mm-hmm.
So and I think there's obviously could be some cons there too, but realistically, when it comes to long-term control over your company, going public is the wrong way to do it if you want to control things.
But I mean, who are we to talk though? Because looks like Real, they went public. I don't know how this has affected their long game, but they did just acquire Remax for under $1 billion.
Yeah.
Under $1 billion. I couldn't even believe that.
But here's the other thing that I thought was interesting too, is you said that Morgan Stanley and another investment firm was financing this whole thing.
So they're only on the hook for 300 million.
So from a leverage standpoint, if you're Real, why wouldn't you do it?
Absolutely.
We have an opportunity to acquire these people and we've got someone else to foot the bill. This is 1990s Silicon Valley all over again, but with real estate. We're investing on the dream. We're investing on the what could be. And I just don't think we're ever going to get there. I think agents are too unpredictable. The failure rate in the industry is way too high. So it's there's a train in the background.
All right. Do you have anything else that you want to say to close out this topic, or am I moving on?
We can move on. I just think it's going to be super interesting to see how this all shakes out. And I think it could. Yeah. I think ripples of this will be felt along the whole industry, regardless of if you're with one of these two brokerages or not. Similar to we saw with Compass and Anywhere, the ripple effect of this is going to change the industry in more ways than we can ever know.
I agree. And I love that we started this show because we can talk about it. We can bring other people who maybe are closer to these things on to be able to talk about it. So I'm very excited. Here's somebody that I've never heard of, and I'm interested to talk about it. Mike Fawaz launches new broker platform with UWM, which I hate saying that. For some reason, I feel like it should be UVM or something, UWM, as its first lender. So this was breaking April 27th, today. Housing Wire dropped an exclusive this morning. Not even going to try to pronounce the author's name, but Mike Fawaz, the former Rocket Pro EVP, who walked from the mega lender in February after 14 years, has launched a brand new broker platform with, again, UWM being the first lender partner on board. And isn't that one lender in South Dakota that, okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking that. So Fawaz spent 14 years at Rocket. He led the wholesale channel through Rocket Pro. Then he resigned, but 3 months later, he resurfaces with a platform, lands UWM as his first anchor lender, the same lender that Rocket spent the last 5 years fighting in the broker channel. The story is not the platform. The story is which lender got the call first.
Yeah. Well, and I think that brings up a whole nother, this story brings up a whole nother thing. Like we were talking about acquisition on the real estate side of things with the previous story. And now what's really weird is we have these nationwide lenders that are getting drug in and either partnering with brokerages, especially nationwide brokerages, or they're acquiring, Rocket just acquired Redfin. Now, granted, that was a pretty small brokerage, but they just acquired them. So I think now not only do we have real estate companies in the mix, but now we've got mortgage lenders. At some point, I think we're going to get into an antitrust issue here.
Monopoly, yep.
Consumer advocacy issues, because we've already seen it with Zillow, for example, and their in-house lending with the kickbacks and all that, alleged malfeasance that took place where they were kicking back, and it's like, it is interesting because the way the real estate industry is set up from a compensation standpoint, it really opens the door for a lot of, unethical behavior when you start mixing real estate brokerages and lenders. I think you kind of, you take the separation of church and state away when you start putting people together. And that will be, I don't think that is a good place for the industry personally. But I think we're going to see it.
Well, I think the wholesale channel is going to keep eating retail's lunch as long as the rates stay tight. The brokers who win the next 18 months are the ones that shop 10 lenders, not one.
Yeah.
So it's interesting where, like, when you get somebody and they're already pre-approved and they didn't talk to you about who to go to, and then their rates are like fucking ridiculous or whatever. Make sure, I would say, as an agent, that you just watch out for your clients. Make sure that who they're going to isn't like a monster who can charge them a lot. Because again, as they start narrowing down, they can start to charge whatever they want because they know you don't have options. They know you don't, have anywhere else to go. So show your client the spread, and that's how you keep their business when the refi window is going or ongoing. All right, let's move on. So we briefly discussed this in the last episode, but Sam Stair, owner of S2 Real Estate Group in Milwaukee, was arrested last Wednesday on federal gun trafficking, drug trafficking, and money laundering charges. His office manager, Jeanette Lopez, was also charged, which I didn't know. Per the federal complaint, Stair allegedly rented homes and apartments to drug operators to use as stash and trap houses, then deposited the rent into the same accounts as legitimate tenants to allegedly conceal the source. Man, imagine like finding this out and uncovering this whole thing. Yeah. Well, the detention hearing is happening today, April 27th. All charges are alleged. Both defendants are presumed innocent until proven otherwise. Here's the deal, though. 18 people total were arrested in this conspiracy. None of S2's licensed agents have been named in the indictment. So that goes to show that they did have licensed agents. We should have, looked that up and researched it. But we're like, oh my God, imagine being an agent license with this company, and then you have this huge fall from grace. And this is in Milwaukee, which is like very close to where I'm at. The Milwaukee real estate community had no public visibility into any of this. The complaint specifically describes Stair allegedly using the brokerage's rental management arm as the laundering pipeline. So it was kind of like away from the, buying and selling part of it.
I think this is also there's probably a much bigger investigation out there. And they're using this right now to put some leverage on these 18 people to try to get somebody to talk. But I think the other interesting, this is a federal charge. The feds don't come after you until they're pretty much ready to go, and it's going to be a slam dunk. So I'm curious to see where this is headed, because I think there's a much bigger story here. And I'm curious to see if it has to do with real estate, because it, especially with what's going on in that Milwaukee area and the revitalization and there's a lot of money right now in that market. It will be interesting to see where this really goes. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Agreed. And honestly, just a plug here, guys, this is the exact territory that we cover every week on True Crime and Real Estate every Tuesday. The cases, the trade groups will not touch, and the patterns nobody else is connecting. So hit follow wherever you get your podcasts, because we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, everywhere else for that podcast as well. All right, next topic. I don't think this needs much discussion, but I do think agents need to be aware. The Department of Justice dropped its criminal probe of Federal Chair Jerome Powell on Friday, clearing the Senate runway for Kevin Warsh as the next Fed chair. Housing Wire's Logan, I'm not going to try his last name, filed a piece this morning asking what a Warsh-led Fed actually means for mortgage rates. 30-year fixed sits at 6.39% on the Housing Wire dashboard, 15 years at 15.85%. Optimal Blue showed 6.28% nationally. It was also reported that the housing demand is positive, even as the Iran war continues. Buyers are showing up despite the headlines. The lock-in effect is loosening at the same time. Inman's Intel survey out today shows homeowners are finally willing to give up their ultra-low mortgage rates and actually list. So what do you think about that, Josh?
I think I think the interesting thing about it is I don't think the person is really going to change a lot. However, I think the perception of the person that they put in there is what's going to change the deal.
Who actually decides it, though? Because I'm seeing Warsh has been the rates down candidate since the day his name surfaced. And I'm like, well, how do you actually control that? I mean, I don't know.
I think he has enough control that he can control it to a certain extent. But a lot of times, it seems like the Fed, a lot of the times, they control the perception and then they allow the market to take care of everything else. And so I think the administration, which is crazy because I think, the Fed has always kind of been an impartial third, party. Yeah. And I think this is kind of the first time where we've had a president where he's been like, I don't want an impartial third party, because that's what I got with Jerome Powell, and we can see how that went. So I think this is going to be interesting to see. I don't think it's going to have as big of an effect as some people want. I've heard a lot of people like, oh, interest rates are going to drop to 2%. I'm like, not going to happen. I think we've played that game, and we found out what happened when we drop rates that low.
China buys up all the houses. That's what.
Yeah, exactly. And you get a bunch of people buying houses who shouldn't be buying houses, and paying way too much for them. So I don't see it happening. I don't see it having a huge change short term. I do think it is going to have a longer term effect, just because it will be a new Fed chair, and that monetary policy that they affect will have longer term effects. I just think short term we might see a little blip. But I kind of think rates have kind of stabilized where they're at. The treasury bonds and everything are kind of stagnant right now. I think the whole conflict in Iran long-term is going to have more effect on interest rates than who the Fed chair is at this point. I think that's going to be a bigger driver to economic type stuff than who the Fed chair is.
All right, this is our last topic. And again, I don't think it's something that we have to harp on, but I do think it's something agents should be aware of. These are three connected stories. Number one, Compass filed to dismiss the Northwest MLS counterclaim, calling NWMLS a monopolist. Number 2, America Foy at Inman dropped an opinion piece this morning arguing Compass is not retreating from antitrust warfare. It is choosing its targets. And number 3, Recruitment Insights Q1 report shows agent movement is up 25% year over year. So that was also on Inman. Brokers can no longer wait and see. So the Compass NWMLS, I hate saying that, fight is not really about Washington State. It's about which version of the MLS survives in the next 2 years. So just like we talked about, the Chicago MLS MRED has already opened its private listing network nationwide and signed Compass as the first brokerage feed, which makes me wonder, should we look into this as a brokerage, right? As a brokerage as a whole. The agent movement, and we don't even know, by the way, if there's like a one and all agents, could a few agents be a member, or like, is it one and all? The agent movement number is the leading indicator. When agents move at 25% year over year, brokerages either win or they shed market share fast.
Okay, so when you were just talking, I thought of definitely a new take of the whole private listing network. If you join MRED, right, and I'm an agent with our company, my real estate company, and I join MRED to their private listing network, and Compass has already joined to have a brokerage feed, do I then get access to their private listings? Because I would make the argument,
you do.
The second that happens, this is no longer a private listing network.
Well, it is, because it's within that MLS.
But I understand that.
You're thinking of office exclusive.
To a certain extent, yes. But
because private means not public. Like, I can't, Joe Schmo on fucking Zillow, I can't see that shit. But as a real estate agent, as a member of this MLS, I should be able to see it, But I get what you're saying. But I would think you're referring to office exclusive.
No, and I am. Yeah, to a certain extent I am. There is an office exclusive, which has already been approved. That's something we've done for a long time.
Yeah.
I just think at some point, how do you say private? What makes it private? Because the more agents you get into it, and here's the other question, how is that different than any other MLS? Because you used to have to be a member to get the private listing network of the MLS. That used to be the big sales, is once you're an agent, you can join an MLS, and now you get the exclusivity of being part of that. So I just want to know, at what point do we say, we have 250,000 agents in MRED now, and they're all doing a private listing network.
I think private just means that the consumer doesn't have free access to it, which almost makes us give us more value again.
But here's the thing, and maybe they'll put checks and balances in, but you and me both know there's going to be agents that are sending those listings out to people and, using them to drum up leads. And as an agent, you're going to tout that when you go to a listing presentation. Hey, I'm a member of a private listing.
I'm allowed to, though. I'm allowed to send them, as far as I believe. I would be allowed to send those to consumers. I just can't post them online publicly.
And that's what I'm saying.
So if I have a match for my clients, I'm going to be like, yo, here's some shit you can't find on Zillow or Realtor.com.
No, and I totally get that. But here's the problem. You send it to your client, and your client hops on Facebook and says, look at this nice house that we just found. Because you can't control your client.
That my fucking agent found for me.
Right? Okay. So they post the private listing publicly online. They're not beholden to any type of standards because they're not an agent.
True.
So, I just think, at what point are we deluding ourselves to say this is really a private listing network? Part of it is, I think it's marketing. It's showing exclusivity. I've talked to multiple Compass agents, and they have all told me the same thing. Compass pushes hey, we have a private listing network. And part of it is their clientele is, higher net worth individuals. They normally list more luxury type homes. At some point, if you go to a listing appointment and this happens, and you say, oh, I have access to a private listing, you and 250,000 other people in the country have access. It's not really private anymore.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's going to come down to what is the perception by the consumer with all of this.
Well, that was a great show as far as I'm concerned. $880 million just changed hands between Real and Remax. Mike Fawaz is back in the game with UWM in its corner. Brokerage owner is sitting in federal court today. Powell's out. Warsh is on deck. And buyers are walking back into the market. We're going to keep telling you exactly what is happening. Hit follow, hit subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow, live noon CST, unfiltered.
See you guys tomorrow.